My name's Alex. I'm 29 years old and I live alone in a small, quiet neighborhood just outside of Denver. I have a stable job. I work in logistics for a mid-sized company. Honestly, life's been pretty good lately. Not perfect, but good. I recently went through a breakup. We were together for a few months, nothing too long, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. I thought maybe it was going somewhere. Turned out it wasn't, but you move on. I'm not the kind of guy who lets one thing throw everything off. I have my house, I have football on Sundays, and I've got peace. That counts for a lot. Anyway, it was a Sunday morning. One of those slow, quiet ones where you don't have anything urgent to do, so you finally get around to cleaning up your place a bit. I was in that kind of mood, music on low windows, open just me in a vacuum. I actually enjoy it. It clears my head. Once I finished inside, I took the trash out, just routine stuff. That's when I saw her, Melissa. She lives across the street, always has. She was sitting on the edge of her lawn in an old sweatshirt and slippers, holding a coffee mug like it weighed 100 pounds. She looked, I don't know, like someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. It was the first time I'd seen her without makeup, and she still looked good, but not in the usual way, in a human way. We'd always had a neighborly thing going, nothing more. I'd helped her fix her garage light once. She brought me cookies around the holidays, just friendly. She's married 2 kids, and from what I could see, a picture-perfect family. At least that's what I thought. I waved. Morning, I said. She looked up slowly like she just remembered where she was. Hey, she replied. Then her voice dropped a little. Alex, can I say something weird? I hesitated. Sure, I said. You okay? She shook her head, then looked me dead in the eyes. I can't keep this in anymore. For a second, I didn't know what she meant. I even laughed a little awkwardly. What exactly, I asked, trying to keep it light. She looked down at her mug. I don't want to talk about it here, but I need to talk, and I don't have anyone. I paused. Do you want to come over for a bit? I said. I can make coffee or crack a beer, whatever you prefer. She hesitated, looked toward her house, then back at me. Yeah, she said, actually. 10 minutes later, we were sitting on my back porch. The sun was warming up, birds chirping, like it was any other lazy Sunday. I handed her a beer, sat across from her, and didn't say anything. She took a sip, then another, and then she started talking. At first, just general stuff, how busy life had been, how hard it was raising kids. I nodded, not saying much. But then she went deeper. She told me she hadn't felt truly loved in years, that her husband, who I always assumed was Mr. Perfect, barely noticed her anymore. He disappears, she said, sometimes for whole weekends. He says it's work, but I'm not stupid. She looked me in the eye. I think he's cheating on me. I can't prove it, but I feel it. She said the house felt like a museum, quiet, cold. The only time she felt seen was when she looked in the mirror and reminded herself she was still here. I've stayed because of the kids, but I'm starting to feel like I'm teaching them the wrong lesson. I didn't know what to say. I really didn't. I always thought they were one of the good ones, the type couple that jogs together, posts holiday photos with matching sweaters. Honestly, I said, I had no idea. You always seemed happy. She smiled bitterly. That's the trick, right? Smile enough and no one looks too close. We talked for a couple of hours. She cried once, not loudly, just a quiet, tired tear that slid down her cheek like it had done it before. I mostly just listened. Eventually, she stood up. Thanks, she said. I didn't mean to dump this on you. You didn't, I said. You just needed to let it out. That's okay. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and left. I sat there for a while after she was gone, trying to process what I just heard, not because I wanted to get involved, that wasn't my place, but because it reminded me how little we really know about the people living 10 feet away. That night, I didn't turn on the football game. I just sat there and thought. It had been about 2 weeks since that conversation on my back porch. Melissa hadn't stopped by, hadn't texted, hadn't waved across the street, just silence. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she felt embarrassed for opening up, or maybe things had calmed down at home. Either way, I figured it was one of those moments that happens, gets heavy, and then passes. I went back to my routine workouts, football repeat. The weather was getting warmer, so I spent more time outside. I mowed the lawn, fixed a leak under the kitchen sink, Even started reading again in the evenings, something I hadn't done in months. But in the quiet moments, I kept thinking about her, not in a romantic way, just wondering. Then one afternoon, I was pulling into my driveway after work, and I saw Ron, my older neighbor from two doors down, standing by his mailbox. I rolled down the window and waved. Hey, Ron, how's it going? He walked over, leaning on the mailbox like it was part of him. You hear about the Sandersons? He asked, nodding toward Melissa's house. I shook my head. No, what? He looked around like someone might be listening. She filed for divorce. Papers went in last week, said she's been done for a while. I froze. That was fast. But then I remembered what she said on my porch. She probably hadn't made that decision overnight. Maybe that night when she opened up was just her finally reaching the point of no return. Damn, I said. I thought they were solid. Ron shrugged. Everyone did. Goes to show you, huh? Never really know what's happening inside someone's walls. He was right. You see two people smiling on their porch, barbecuing, walking their kids to school, and you think that's the whole story, but it's not. It never is. That evening, I sat on my porch for a while with a beer, just watching the neighborhood wind down. Kids were playing with scooters. Someone grilled hot dogs down the street. A dog barked at a squirrel like it was personal. But Melissa's house was still lights off, curtains closed. Later that week, I ran into her again. I was coming out of the grocery store when I saw her walking toward her car, a bag of stuff in each hand, her keys barely hanging from one finger. I hesitated, then called out, "Hey, need a hand?" She turned, smiled faintly. "Alex, hi." I offered to carry the bags, and she didn't say no. We walked to her car in silence. "I heard about everything," I said carefully. She didn't flinch. "Yeah, word gets around." We stood there for a second, both unsure what came next. Then she looked at me and said, "Thanks for that day. You didn't make it weird. You just listened." "You didn't make it weird either," I replied. She smiled again, this time a little more real. That weekend, she showed up at my door. I was watching a game, chips and a beer on the table. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened the door in a t-shirt and socks. "Hey," she said. "Sorry to drop by. I was wondering, could you help me move the kids' bunk bed? I'm rearranging their room. Feels like something I can control right now." "Sure," I said, without thinking twice. "Just give me a sec." I grabbed my shoes, followed her across the street, and spent the next hour trying to disassemble an IKEA nightmare that had probably been put together during a marriage that was already falling apart. She didn't say much, just handed me tools, held parts in place. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't overly sentimental. It was just normal. Before I left, she asked, "Can I repay you with coffee tomorrow morning? I make a decent French press." "Sounds good," I said. And that was how it started. Over the next few weeks, little things kept happening. She'd wave from the porch more often. I'd find a paper bag of cookies on my doorstep with a note that said, "Too many, please help me eat them." Sometimes she'd call me over to help fix a drawer, lift a box, look at a flickering light. Sometimes she didn't really need help. I could tell, but I didn't mind. Then came a Sunday morning. I was back to my usual cleaning routine, tossing out trash, and she was sitting on her porch again, just like the first time. Only this time she wasn't sad, just thoughtful. "You're making a habit of taking out trash on Sundays," she said with a little smirk. "Got to keep the routine alive," I replied. She paused. "I'm glad you're around, Alex." I looked at her. She wasn't fishing for anything, just saying it. And I felt something shift inside me, not attraction, not obligation, just a quiet recognition that sometimes being present for someone isn't about grand gestures or emotional declarations. It's about showing up again and again when they least expect it. I nodded. Me too. That night, I went to bed with her words in my head, not because I thought it meant something more, but because sometimes the things you never see coming come quietly and stay. It was a Thursday evening when I finally decided to say something. Melissa had been coming by more and more over the past few weeks. At first, it was just help with small things, a drawer that wouldn't close, a leaky hose, a light bulb that needed changing. And I didn't mind, really I didn't. But lately she was dropping by just to talk, to check in, sometimes with a bottle of wine, other times with takeout. And there was this look in her eyes, not flirtatious, not demanding, just expectant, like she was waiting for me to take a step forward. But I did not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't sure what I felt or what she needed from me. That night, she knocked around 7:30. I was just finishing dinner, leftover grilled chicken, nothing fancy. She had her hair up, loose sweatshirt, no makeup again. She looked relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before, or maybe I just hadn't noticed. "Hey," she said, holding up a bottle. "I thought you might be bored." I smiled politely. Not quite bored, but I wouldn't say no to some company. She walked in like she had a right to be there, not rudely, just comfortably, like it had become a rhythm, me and her end of the day talking about nothing. We sat on the back porch. She poured two glasses, handed me one. The sun was setting over the edge of the neighborhood. Everything was still peaceful. She talked about her kids, how they were adjusting, how her youngest was having nightmares lately. She looked tired when she said that, really tired. I listened, nodded, responded when I could, but the whole time something kept tugging at the back of my mind. After a while, I set my glass down and leaned forward. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She looked over, a little caught off guard. "Sure. I've noticed you've been around more. I started carefully, and it's been nice, but I don't want to misread anything." Her expression didn't change much, maybe just a little softer around the edges. "What do you think you're reading?" she asked. I think I said slowly, "You're lonely, and I get that, I really do. But I'm not sure what you're hoping this is." She didn't say anything right away, just looked down at the deck beneath her feet, then back up at me. I spent the last 6 years trying to be someone's wife, trying to fix everything quietly, trying not to ask for too much. And in the end, I felt like I was the only one even there. She took a breath. "And now that it's over, I'm realizing how much I stopped feeling. I don't want a replacement, Alex. I just want to feel seen again. And when I'm around you, I do." That hit me, not in some romantic movie way, just in a real way. She wasn't chasing anything. She wasn't trying to seduce or manipulate. She was just reaching out in the only way she knew how. "I hear you," I said, "and you're a good person, stronger than I think I realized. But I'm not in a place where I'm ready for anything serious. I just got out of something too, and even if it was way lighter than what you've been through." She nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for serious. I'm asking for presence." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just looked at her, then reached for my glass again. We sat for a while in silence, not tense, just processing. Before she left, she turned at the door. "Thanks for being honest," she said. "You too." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes this time. And then she was gone. The next couple of days were quiet. She didn't text, didn't stop by. Her house felt like a closed shell again. And maybe that should have felt like relief, but it didn't. Saturday morning, I saw her in the driveway with her two kids packing groceries into the trunk. I waved. She waved back, but it wasn't the same. I told myself that I'd done the right thing, kept boundaries, stayed clear. But part of me hated how her wave looked smaller. The truth is, I did enjoy her company. I liked hearing about her kids, her day, her thoughts on movies we both pretended not to like. I liked the quiet understanding we had, the comfort in not having to pretend. And now that it had paused, I felt his absence like a missing piece in my routine. That Sunday around dusk, I was back on my porch. No music, no game, just me and the breeze. And then out of nowhere, I heard footsteps. She was standing at the edge of my porch steps wearing a hoodie, holding a small plastic container in both hands. "I made too much pasta," she said. "Want some?" I stood, opened the screen door, and stepped aside. "Always," I replied. She walked in, set the container on the table. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. It wasn't a restart. It wasn't a moment. It was just simple. That night as she left, she said something that stuck with me. "You know, I keep telling myself this isn't anything, but maybe it's exactly what I need it to be, nothing more, nothing less." And for once, I didn't feel the need to define it either. Sometimes being there for someone quietly, honestly, is enough. It had been a few more weeks since Melissa stood at my door with that container of pasta. Since then, we developed this quiet, unspoken rhythm. She'd stop by once or twice a week, sometimes with leftovers, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with nothing but her presence. And each time it felt more natural than the last. We didn't call it anything. We didn't talk about what it was. but it was something a part of both our routines now. I started to notice small changes. She laughed more, not the forced kind, the kind that slips out before you realize it. She wore her hair down more often, talked about books again. She even mentioned looking into online courses, something with interior design just to explore it. And me, I was changing too slowly without meaning to. I found myself looking forward to her knock. I checked the porch more often. When she wasn't around, I missed her company, her calm, her ability to talk about real things without turning them into drama. One Thursday night, she came over just as I was finishing dinner. No warning, just a quiet knock and her standing there with a bottle of iced tea and a tired smile. "I needed to get out of the house," she said. "The kids are at their dad's for the night." I nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." We sat on the porch like usual, but there was a weight to her silence this time. She didn't dive into stories or vent about anything. She just looked at the trees, the sky, the street, like she was trying to feel something she couldn't name. After a while, I asked gently, "Everything okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, I just didn't want to be alone tonight." Something about the way she said that settled in me deeper than I expected. We sat in silence for a long time after that. The next morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't even thought about football all week. That night, I got a call from Melissa. "Hey," she said, "sorry, this is random. The back faucet's leaking again. You think you could take a look?" I said I'd be right over. She opened the door before I could even knock, flashlight already in hand. We spent the next 30 minutes fiddling with the spout, laughing at how useless the manual was. At one point, she leaned in to hold the base of the faucet steady, and for a moment, we were just close, not in a romantic way, just two people working together, comfortable in each other's space. After we fixed it, she made us coffee, and we sat at her kitchen table, a rare change of scene. The place was quiet. The kids were already asleep upstairs. The house, though the same one I'd seen for years from across the street, felt different, inside lived-in, personal, real. We talked longer than usual that night about things we hadn't touched before, childhood memories, regrets the people we used to be, and the people we were still trying to become. At one point, she looked at me and asked, "Do you ever feel like you've been drifting through your own life?" I thought for a moment, then answered honestly, "Yeah, especially after the breakup. I kept telling myself I was fine, but some days I catch myself staring at the wall for 10 minutes without even realizing it." She smiled sadly. "That's exactly what it feels like I've been living sideways for years." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. We just sat there in quiet understanding. That weekend, something shifted. She started texting more little things. "Found this song, thought you'd like it. Do you know a good place to get shelves installed? Do you want to come over? I made too much spaghetti again." And I didn't push back. I replied, I went, I stayed longer. One afternoon, I was at the hardware store getting a part for my shed door, and I saw a set of garden lights on sale. I thought of her backyard, how dim it always looked in the evenings, and I bought two sets without thinking. That night, I showed up with the lights and a drill. "I figured your kids might like a little glow in the backyard," I said. She looked at me like I'd handed her the moon. "You didn't have to." "I know." We installed them together. The kids helped. By the time the sun went down, the backyard was lit with a soft, warm glow that made everything feel softer. Her daughter hugged my leg before going back inside. Her son asked if I'd be around for movie night on Friday. And Melissa, she just looked at me with something unspoken in her eyes. That was the moment I realized I'd crossed a line I hadn't meant to, not a romantic one, an emotional one. This wasn't just helping a neighbor anymore. Later that night back at home, I sat on my couch and thought about all of it. About her laugh, her stories, her quiet way of sitting next to me without needing to fill the space with noise. And I realized something uncomfortable. She was starting to matter to me more than I planned, more than I thought I could let happen again, especially not with someone whose life was so full of real weight, real responsibility. Two kids, a divorce, years of pain. I wasn't sure I could carry any of that. I wasn't sure I should even try. But I also knew one thing for sure: I wasn't ready to let go, not yet. Summer slowly gave way to early fall. The neighborhood shifted with the seasoned trees turning gold at the tips, kids biking to school in light jackets, porch lights coming on a little earlier each night. Life moved forward as it always does, and Melissa was still in it. We never defined what was happening between us, never sat down to draw lines or give it a name, but we were spending time together consistently, comfortably, quietly. She'd stop by after putting the kids to bed. I'd swing by her place with groceries or tools or just because she asked. Weekends blurred into late nights, coffee into dinners, dinners into long conversations on the back porch. We weren't dating, but we weren't strangers. And whatever it worked for both of us. Still, there were moments where I found myself pausing, questioning where this was going. I'd look at her and wonder, am I ready for all of this? The answer wasn't always yes, but it wasn't no either. One Saturday afternoon, we were in my backyard putting together a used fire pit I'd picked up off Facebook Marketplace. Melissa was reading the instructions upside down, making sarcastic comments. The kids were with their dad for the weekend. It was just us. At one point, as I tightened a bolt, I looked over and said, half laughing, you know, I didn't think I'd be spending my fall evenings building backyard furniture with my neighbor. She looked up and smiled. Neither did I, but here we are. And just like that, I realized how natural it had all become, how much space she'd filled in my life without forcing it. She didn't demand attention. She didn't ask me to be more than I was. She just showed up. And somehow that had been enough to pull me closer than I'd ever expected. A few days later, we were sitting at her kitchen table after dinner. The kids were upstairs half asleep. The dishes were still in the sink. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through my phone, and she was just sitting there watching the rain outside, and she said something out of nowhere. You know, sometimes I forget I'm not married anymore. I looked up. Not in a bad way, she continued. Just I spent so many years defining myself through that relationship, through what I was supposed to be wife, mother, fixer, and now I'm just Melissa. That's not just anything, I said. She looked at me and smiled, the tired kind that carries more than words can hold. I don't want to start over, she said. I don't want a label or some dramatic new chapter. I just want peace. I want to be around someone who listens, someone who makes the day feel a little lighter. I nodded. You've got that. At least here you do. And that was the first time I felt it clearly. We weren't building toward anything more. We already were what we needed to be. No expectations, no pressure, no illusions of forever, just present support, real life. The next few weeks followed the same rhythm. She came over when she wanted to. I did the same. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes she cried after a hard day with the kids. Sometimes I vented about work. But mostly we just existed near each other, and that was enough. One Sunday afternoon, I was watching a game on the couch. Melissa was sitting at the dining table helping her daughter with homework. Her son was on the floor building something with Legos. The house was louder than usual, a little chaotic, but it felt warm, lived in, strangely right. Later, after they left, I sat there in the quiet and I thought, I don't need anything more than this. I wasn't in love, not the big cinematic kind, but I cared deeply and I knew she did too. We never kissed, never held hands, never crossed that line, and we didn't need to. One evening as she was leaving, she paused at the door and said, "Thank you for not asking for more than I can give." I replied, "Thank you for giving exactly what I needed." That was the last defining moment. After that, it was just life ongoing, simple good. Now months later, we're still here. She still lives across the street. We still see each other a few times a week. Her kids still call me Alex from over there. Sometimes she brings over dinner. Sometimes I drop off extra groceries. No one in the neighborhood asks questions. They probably don't need to because sometimes relationships aren't about labels or outcomes. They're about timing, respect, quiet connection. And sometimes not everything has to become something more. Sometimes this is enough. The story of Alex and Melissa teaches us a profound lesson. Sometimes the greatest act of love is simply being present without demanding more. Alex, a young man navigating life after a breakup, became an unexpected anchor for Melissa, a neighbor trapped in a crumbling marriage. When she opened up about her pain, Alex didn't try to fix her or push for answers. He listened, offering a safe space where she could breathe again. Their quiet, undefined connection, built on shared coffee, small favors, and honest conversations, shows that relationships don't always need labels or romance to be meaningful. Melissa's journey from feeling invisible to rediscovering her worth reminds us that healing often starts with someone who sees you not for what you could be, but for who you are in the moment. Alex's choice to stay present despite his own uncertainties teaches us that showing up consistently without expectations can transform someone's life and our own. Their story is a reminder to cherish the quiet connections that grow naturally, to offer kindness without agenda, and to embrace the beauty of relationships that don't need to be more than they are. So be there for someone, even in the smallest ways. It might mean everything. Have you ever found or offered a quiet connection that changed someone's day? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If this moved you, subscribe and join our community for more stories of compassion and human connection. Let's keep inspiring each other to stay present.